connection water main only. And so the estimated construction cost that the grant was based on is 2.1 million. So the grant funding is confirmed for 73% of that, a little over 1.5 million. So the remaining 560,000 in construction costs has to be funded by borrowing, Eagle Cliff borrowing. Also, and I'm not sure why exactly, but we didn't receive the engineering and consulting fees were not included in the approved scope of the grant, so that's also going to have to be funded by borrowing. And the grant process took a lot longer than we'd hoped and thought it would. It was based on a construction in 2023, which is not feasible, and so some cost escalation to 2024, when we can hopefully construct the project, would also factor into the amount that has to be borrowed by Eagle Cliff service area. Oh, just to remind everyone, the project we're talking about is connecting in the near Jason Road, running down Ocean View Road and then Eagle Cliff Road and connecting to the south end of the Eagle Cliff water system. There are 10 culverts along the alignment that would have to be integrated with the water main project. And we've mentioned this before, but it's the culvert replacement component of the project is a municipal expense as opposed to a service area cost, which is these costs were listed here for the water main funding sources. So we've got design and survey costs, which are being incurred as we speak. That would have to be retroactively paid from borrowed money once those funds are established. Then we have the construction itself, which is the bulk of the cost. There will be some consultant costs for services during construction. And then we've allowed for an 8% cost escalation allowance from 2023 to 2024. And so that leaves the amount that needs to be borrowed to be 820,000. And what we're hoping, because this is really the limiting factor in the time frame when the project can be delivered, is getting that process of borrowing the money going. It does take several months. We know there will be other properties joining the system along the route of this water main. We know some that are interested, and we just don't know how many. But any new properties joining the system will reduce the debt amount because they'll be paying into the project. So in terms of a proposed timeline, we received the final grant approval in August. The design and the preparation of tender documents is underway, and we expect to be completed this year. And as I mentioned, the real critical path in terms of the project delivery timeline is getting elector assent for borrowing and a loan authorization bylaw for the portion that has to be borrowed. And so that's something we are seeking at this meeting is an agreement from the Eagle Cliff LAC to proceed with the process to authorize the borrowing of up to 820,000. Then we can be looking at tendering and procurement in April, May of next year. Once the loan authorization bylaw is established, and then construction in starting in June of next year, and it probably take until the spring of 2025 before it's completed. But we could have the project completed before summer of 2025, essentially. So that's really where we're at with this project, as requested, a bit of an update on the Cove Bay water treatment plant, which is of course of interest to this group, which would be supplying the water. The latest issues we've had have been with the ceramic filter tubes, the ceramic elements themselves. There's two vessels, there's two modules that are the core of the filtration process in the plant. Each one has 38 of these ceramic elements in it, and we've had problems with them failing. The latest investigation seemed to indicate that there was probably a manufacturing defect with the whole batch of these ceramic elements, and the firm that supplied the equipment is replacing them under warranty. We expect to have those. They told us in mid-September that it was 60 to 90 days before we would have those in place. So that's November to December timeframe of having the ceramic elements replaced and then the plant up and running. And so that's where we're at with the Cove Bay water treatment plant.
Okay, thank you for that, Patrick. Len or Glenn, any questions on Patrick's presentation there?
Well, I have a few, but I think we're going to do Kristen's presentation first. Is that what we discussed?
Well, I was going to say that certainly for the public comment section, but if members of the LAC wanted to discuss with Patrick, I think that's fair.
Okay. If you don't mind, then I just wanted to ask a couple things. So obviously the original scope of the work included the Eagle Cliff water main upgrades, as well as the high-level reservoir tank, which are no longer part of this scope. So I'm just curious to understand, once the connection is made, I assume LAC dissolves into becoming part of the Cove Bay LAC local area committee. So how do we continue along our path to complete the work that needs to be done in Eagle Cliff specifically, when the bigger picture of the Cove Bay system then becomes part of our mandate as well? And will there be any inclination from the Cove Bay committee to tackle those issues? So I'm just wondering if that's something that, are we just putting those other issues aside for now and figuring it out later?
No, we're not putting them aside. Those needs are still there, as well as other needs within the Cove Bay water system.
Yeah, I guess that's the question: is where do our priorities then fall? And I guess that's, we'll be part of a bigger committee, I imagine, to determine what the priorities will be. So I'm just kind of getting a realistic understanding of where those priorities fall.
That is a good question. I don't know exactly where they fall. We haven't gone through the process of looking at what the entire combined system would be, and our Eagle Cliff, or the water main upgrades in Eagle Cliff, a higher priority than somewhere else in the system. I'm not sure. They may be. There is a need for larger reservoir tanks at other sites as well. This one at the high zone site is probably one of the closest to its end of life. So I would say that would probably still be a high priority, since it's serving a portion of the water system. But you're right, though, the decision making around future improvements and upgrades becomes at a larger scale and with a view to the broader system, to the broader combined system.
So what is the role of the Eagle Cliff Local Area Committee after this project commences or completes? Do we, is there a process to combine the two committees, and is that something that we should start on sooner rather than later, so we can get an understanding of what new priorities will be part of our greater scope when it comes to Cove Bay?
I think you're getting into Kristen's presentation at this point,
that's
so
fair.
maybe we should hear from her, and then
Yeah.
Sure.
if that's okay with you, Tim.
Yeah, that's fine by me. Okay, any other questions or comments, Glenn?
No, I'm good. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. That's insightful questions. Thank you for that. Len, anything from you? No, you're good. Okay. Kirsten, you're next up then, please.
Okay, thank you. I'll just take a moment to share my screen now.
You still there, Kristen?
Yeah, I'm just having trouble reaching slideshow here.
It is showing on.
Okay. Whoops.
There we go.
Okay, so you've got it now, have you?
We do. Yep.
Okay, so the planned project, I'll go through my presentation. I've added a note to myself to talk a little bit about like a process for combining. I've added that to the end, so I'll go through it and I'll make sure that I talk a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation. So the planned project is a Cove Bay Eagle Cliff interconnection, and it contemplates building the water main connection between Cove Bay and Eagle Cliff. It includes decommissioning the Eagle Cliff Reservoir and joining the two local service areas. And it's a combination and integration of two local service areas, Cove Bay and Eagle Cliff. As Patrick mentioned, it's going to be funded, the interconnection will be funded through the Eagle Cliff residents by parcel taxes and just over $1.5 million of grant funding. The total grant, I'm sorry, I forgot if he mentioned these numbers. It's coming from the feds, 841,000, 700,000, almost 701,000 coming from the province of BC. And that number, 560,870 is funded from the Eagle Cliff residents. Now that's the original grant. That's the original project amount. Patrick mentioned there are some extra consulting fees that went unfunded in the grant. So we do know that we probably need to borrow more than the 560. It is going to require an assent process from the Eagle Cliff residents. And we're planning for the loan to be repaid through the parcel tax. And I'm recommending that it be paid back over a 5-year term. If absolutely necessary, we could consider extending it, but I'm looking at a 5-year term for a particular reason being that it can be borrowed through interim financing that way, which is more of a line of credit model, which allows us to make principal repayments intermittently in the case if we collect money. And that's going to be important when we consider payments that might be collected from benefiting properties located in between the Cove Bay and the Eagle Cliff water systems. So any potential project cost increases are going to result in higher costs to the Eagle Cliff share. There's no more money coming from any of the grant sources. So that's why we need to make sure that we include a cost escalation contingency within that loan amount that we're asking for approval. Using this temporary borrowing model, though, we're only going to borrow what's absolutely necessary, so that if there's project savings or if there's project savings, I guess, if there's project savings, then we're only going to be borrowing exactly what's needed, even if we've authorized that higher ceiling amount to allow for contingencies. If we don't dip into those contingencies, we're not going to borrow them. So that's why we're going to be looking at 820,000. That was per those numbers showed earlier from Patrick, and that's we expect to cover any construction contingency costs and cost escalation. So when we're thinking about this project, we know that we have the properties in Cove Bay, we know we have the properties in Eagle Cliff, and then we have these properties that lie in between the two systems. So any properties that are located in between Cove Bay and Eagle Cliff, if they indicate that they want to join, they're going to have to pay a connection fee. And this fee is going to be broken into two components. So one portion of this fee is going to be applied directly to the outstanding balance of the Eagle Cliff loan. So that's where it comes important that we not lock this into longer term borrowing where we have no ability to pay down principal amounts. That's why I'm really pushing for it to be done within the 5-year short-term borrowing model, which allows us to make those principal payments. So any connection fees that we receive from those benefiting properties in between the two water systems, we can use that to make a direct principal repayment, which will benefit Eagle Cliff residents directly by reducing the amount of parcel taxes needed to repay that debt. So we need to consider in this financial model, we need to consider the investments of all of the stakeholder groups. So we've got Eagle Cliff, we've got Cove Bay, and we've got these properties in between. On the Cove Bay side, we know that there's been, over the years, there's been an investment in transmission and distribution infrastructure. We also know that Cove Bay residents have made an investment in their water treatment plant that was funded through contributions from reserves, and it was funded by debt, and it was funded by grant. So that Cove Bay investment in the water treatment plant is equal to the amount that was funded through reserve or through any amounts of principal repayment that's been repaid on that long-term debt. Eagle Cliff has an investment in their transmission and distribution infrastructure as well. So when we're combining them into one local service area, we need to take into account those investments that have been made over the years. So if we kind of looking at the numbers, and I did some back of the napkin kind of math, in total, when we take into account that equity investment in the water treatment plant, as well as the investment in transmission and distribution infrastructure, Cove Bay residents per capita, per household, have about an $8,500 contribution invested in the Cove Bay system. And conversely, Eagle Cliff residents have about $7,000 per property, per household invested in their system. So what we're attempting to do here is to create some kind of equity equilibrium. And if we look at the contribution over time of Cove Bay and the contribution over time of Eagle Cliff, if there's a one-time contribution made from Eagle Cliff to Cove Bay of about $1,500, then that's going to create this equity equilibrium between the two systems. And then I spoke earlier about the properties in between the two systems, that their connection fee was going to be broken into two components. So one component goes directly to reduce that debt in Eagle Cliff, and the other component would be contributed to the new local service area, and it would be their contribution to create this equity equilibrium that we've now achieved through Eagle Cliff and Cove Bay. So once we have that equity equilibrium that's been achieved, we would then have a combined service area, a new local service area, and I'm just calling it Cove Cliff because I thought it was neat. And all of the residents in this new local service area, they'll pay a unified single user rate, and that would continue with the existing model in Cove Bay that we have, which is billed 3 times per year on metered rates. They would pay water treatment plant parcel taxes, and all residents would assume the ongoing maintenance and repair of the combined local area service, the distribution system going forward. And then Eagle Cliff, the residents who were residing in the former Eagle Cliff area, in addition to those, would have a 5-year parcel tax, which is paying off the one-time interconnection costs of the connection to the Cove Bay system. So I did a little graph to kind of show what, and these were my back of the napkin estimates, and they do need to be finalized and refined, but just for illustrative purposes, there would be, I believe, a parcel tax of about $1,700 for 5 years, and that would look after the cost of the interconnection between Eagle Cliff and Cove Bay. There would be a one-time charge to Eagle Cliff of $1,500, and that would be in respect of that equity equilibrium amount. And ongoing from there, from the time the construction was finished, ongoing, there would be annual parcel taxes, which would be shared with the Cove Bay residents, and they would be 107, which is ongoing, and that's a 30-year debt. And then there's a shorter one. It's for an internal loan, and it expires in 2030, and that's $120 per parcel. So ongoing, you can see an initial upfront charge of $3,200, followed by 4 years of almost $2,000, and then ongoing $227 for 2 years, and after that, after 2030, it would be reduced to $107 annually for the ongoing long-term debt for the water treatment plant. And then just for illustrative purposes, what somebody outside of the district would pay if they were one of those properties in between. We calculate the fee to be just over $16,000 to join in the first year. $7,456 of that would go directly to reduce the principal in that Eagle Cliff loan. And the other $8,750 would be a contribution to the reserves of the new combined system. And that number, I've increased it by an estimate of 5%. So if they don't join in the first year, that fee will increase by 5% for each of the 5 years. And that's, of course, to coincide with the interest rate that's being charged on that Cove Bay, on that Eagle Cliff loan, the estimate, the interest estimate that I've used for that Eagle Cliff loan. And ongoing, again, they too would share in the parcel taxes for the ongoing debt for the water treatment plant for those years, both the internal debt expiring in 2029 and the longer term MFA debt, which doesn't expire until 2047 or something, like long after any of us are going to be here. So before I go to questions, how do we actually amalgamate two local service areas? There's different conditions under which that it can happen by bylaw of council. Whether or not you require assent of the electors in one or both areas depends on the conditions with regards to loans or debts, or if the bylaws had been developed with the intent to merge a couple of local service areas. But in this case, because there's debt in Cove Bay side, because there will be debt in the Eagle Cliff side, we do need to go to both areas and make sure that our plan receives the assent of the elector. So it will require an assent process for both local service areas before we can take these steps to amalgamate them. So I'll stop sharing, and I'm happy to take any questions. And I actually invite people to, if they think of things or have more questions, please email me and ask, because that is going to trigger, more thinking and more things to consider. And I'm sure there's a whole lot of things that haven't been considered or haven't been contemplated in this, at this stage of the planning. So I really do appreciate having input or questions from other people.
So Kristen, thanks for that. We've been sort of clamoring for this kind of information now for quite a few years. And it's nice that we're now finally in a position to be able to put that into a table so that it's quite understandable. I do have a couple questions. So the $1,500 equity is a one-time cost that's in advance of the project itself, or is that again something that could be done over multiple years, or Is there any flexibility on that? I'm curious.
It would be done at the time that the bylaw is approved to amalgamate the two local service areas.
Okay. Couple other questions. In terms of the 5-year term for the borrowing, the proposed 5-year term, if a household wanted to just make a single lump sum payment of it all, is that an option, or does that get too complicated to administer?
No, it's an option. I would never recommend that anybody do that though, because what if you sell your house and you've already paid that? You don't get that money back. They can, as long as we keep it in the short-term borrowing, they can. It's called commuting their parcel tax, and anybody can do it, but I don't know why anybody would.
Okay, potentially save some interest, I guess. In terms of the project, the costs that you laid out on your table, how much or which of those numbers are eligible for deferment?
All of them, because they're all going to be on tax notices. The only thing that's not eligible for deferment are user rates, so actual user rates, but all those numbers are contemplated to be collected through parcel tax.
Okay, good, thank you. Another question I had, so we're looking at $820,000 as a potential ask for potential borrowing.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if the project comes in higher than that?
If the project comes in higher than that, we have a couple of different, well, before it's awarded, we're going to know. So it's not going to come in higher than that, like towards the end of the project. We always award like a fixed price contract with a ceiling limit on it. We have a couple of options. We could increase the amount of the parcel tax. We could increase user rates. Those things could happen before an amalgamation. I think our only option at that point is to go back to the parcel tax calculation and look at what that is going to require if it comes in higher.
Would that require an additional assent process? Or?
No, it doesn't, because we're not borrowing. The assent process is required to borrow the funds. So if we're not asking for more borrowing, then we don't need that assent process. Parcel taxes are developed and approved through the budget process. So council would hear feedback about that. There's a parcel tax review process, which happens the first time a new parcel tax is introduced. And that it ensures that only legitimate parcels are being levied with the tax. Certainly council's going to hear feedback from property owners through the budget process, but yeah, the parcel tax doesn't require assent, but it certainly has opportunities for public input.
Okay, thank you. Another question I have is, so assuming this proceeds, Eagle Cliff, as you know, has a $500 capital parcel tax already levied against our properties. I'm assuming that is then no longer in play, so we will no longer have that parcel tax. And does Cove Bay have a capital parcel tax in addition to their user rates?
No, they just have the parcel tax for the debt. They don't have a parcel tax through their user rates.
Okay.
Sorry, they don't have a parcel tax for contribution to reserves.
Okay.
But I'm not ruling that out in the future. I wouldn't rule that out, but at this point they don't. They have pretty much a similar, I mean, when we're looking at that equity equilibrium piece of only $1,500 per property, I think they have a similar level in reserves on a, like on a pro rata basis. They're of course about 6 times larger than Eagle Cliff, but overall they have about the same level of funding in their reserves. And for the most part, we believe the condition of the infrastructure, the distribution and pipelines and that kind of stuff is most of it is relatively kind of in the same condition as that of Eagle Cliff. So
okay, thank you. So just again, to reiterate, the Eagle Cliff parcel tax would no longer be in play.
Mhm.
Okay. And lastly, on that front, what is Eagle Cliff's capital fund at right now? And is any of that being steered towards the project or towards any of the costs, or how's that coming into play?
It's being used in the equity equilibrium calculation. There's about $356,000 in there right now. So when we take the $356,000 plus we take the undepreciated capital cost of the infrastructure and we compare that with the level of reserves in Cove Bay with the undepreciated capital cost of their infrastructure plus their equity, which does not include grant funding or debt funding. It includes just reserve contributions to the water treatment plant. That is how I came up with the equity analysis piece using the reserves and infrastructure costs.
So if I understand what you're saying the $356,000 that Eagle Cliff has accumulated would just become part of the Cove Bay coffers?
Not Cove Bay coffers, the new Cove Cliff.
Cove Cliff coffers?
Yes,
Yeah,
and
okay.
their reserve fund, same thing.
Okay, understood. Those are my questions. Glenn, Len, you guys got any?
Allison's got her hand up there as well.
What?
Allison, do you have a question? You have your hand up for a while.
I'll let you two ask your questions first and then I'll ask mine.
I do have questions. Len, did you want to go first? Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, mine's just quite short. Because I don't have a lot of connections to the other water systems. Kristen, what do you think? What's Cove Bay's reaction going to be to this? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, we're really, no, I guess not happy isn't the right word, but we see this is well thought out. Let's get going.
Mm-hmm.
What's their temperature?
We
don't get a chance.
I've spoken with Murray Scales. He's the chair of the Cove Bay Committee. He's very positive about the whole process. It hasn't really been circulated through Cove Bay.
Okay.
I don't think there's a lot of awareness, certainly among the residents really in Cove Bay. It's just not been a huge, I don't really see a whole lot of downside for Cove Bay. They're going to have additional properties with which to share the long-term debt across. So to me, it just seems like a benefit to them. The downside for them would be, okay, now we're adding infrastructure and assuming the long-term liability for the maintenance as our, it's kind of a, it's a, we're all in this together kind of scenario. So I think for them that it would be, I'm a Cove Bay resident, so I see it as a positive outlook. So I don't see any roadblocks in the way from that side.
Okay.
But who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll start by following that up then. How does it work with the two committees then? I mean,
there'll be one committee.
There'll be one, but I mean, we have currently two chairs. How does that work? Do we have to go through elections? Do we reapply to?
Yeah, we'll have to come up with new terms of reference. We'll have to ensure that there's representation from both of the former legacy committees, and the committee is you're now one system with one pot of money. So there's not a lot of opportunity for people to take position and be positional on this because under a merged system, all of your interests have equal weight. So
to a certain degree, as I say, in talking about the outstanding issues for us, and notably they likely have some outstanding issues for themselves, I'm just wondering if the committee is based on a per capita thing, or is it just open to all residents? We're one committee again. I mean, how do we, how does that unfold? Do they have to apply for this new committee as well?
Yep. We'll establish a new terms of reference, and we will go through our recruitment process and seek volunteer submissions from all eligible people that reside in the area. But I do think it's important to ensure that we do have some legacy representation, just to, at least in the interim, to make sure that we have that sort of knowledge transfer. And I I think that would be important to ensure that we still have that. So I would definitely recommend that we write that into the terms of reference of a new committee. Don't forget, we're not like overrun with applications to volunteer to sit on these committees, so.
For good reason sometimes. So just going back to the parcel tax. So if I can understand this better, the parcel taxes that will be put onto the Eagle Cliff properties are to service the debt for this for our portion here.
For
And
the
you mentioned
connection.
as we pick up the additional properties along the way, that could go towards capital repayment. Does that mean that the parcel taxes would be reduced as we picked up more people?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
those parcel taxes would inevitably come down with their, so you're basing those parcel taxes on 0 pickups along the way right now?
Yeah, that's based on 820 borrowed. So if we borrow 820 and we get a couple of people connecting each year, then that becomes like a $7,500 principal repayment on that loan directly. It's
So
not,
year after year, the parcel tax will be adjusted. It's not reduced as part of the amortization of that parcel, or the length and term of the parcel.
yeah, by keeping it in term financing. I mean, I think most people would probably feel confident that we've reached, over the longer term, we've pretty much approaching the top of the interest rate rising cycle that I don't know that there's a huge risk that they're gonna go through the roof at this point. I think they already are where they're at. The long-term borrowing reflects. So I think in the 5-year term, I think the only place for interest rates is to come down. So I'd rather not lock into a 5-year at 5.5%. I'd rather leave it open, then we can take advantage of interest rates as they start to come down. I don't see any reason to lock that into long-term debt and lose our flexibility in being able to make those principal repayments, as I'm quite sure that there will be some connections in between. I don't want to lose our financial leverage to just reduce the amount of that loan as quickly and as painlessly as possible.
Do we have any idea of the interest of those people in between? I mean, how many potential or how many connections we may be picking up? I'm sure, are people coming forward to express their interest? Is it something that we're requesting them by a certain time to express their interest to do, so that we can understand where we're at?
Patrick, do you have any insight onto that?
A little bit. Well, I see 2 on the call here today and from the Upper Ocean View area, so we know there's some properties there. We did this was back when we were doing the first round of grant applications that was unsuccessful ultimately. We did do a mail out to properties along the contemplated route. We only got, I think, about 30 responses, and about half of them were affirmative that they would be interested. I think that was based on a $30,000 contribution, and as Kristen showed us, it's close to half that with the grant coming into play. So I expect, there was 15 or 16 that actively expressed interest. There may be others that I expect it would be more than that. And there may be others who just didn't see the mail out or pay attention to it, or so that's the only insight we have so far.
So if I could ask a question as a follow-up to that, Glenn. Kirsten, you've shown the sort of 1-year equity contribution payments to both Eagle Cliff and to the new Eagle Cliff, or rather Cove Cliff water system for the in-between properties. In order to make that a little bit more palatable for the in-between properties, is it possible to finance that over multiple years rather than, a $16,000 or $17,000 1-year lump sum?
I don't think so. No, because the only way people have to finance it is, or that we have to offer people to finance is through a parcel tax that we're establishing. And we can't really, it's not really feasible to establish a parcel tax for one property like that. I think the homeowner would have to look to their own personal methods of financing if they wanted maybe to spread it over a couple of years. I don't think we could accommodate that.
Okay, thanks for that. Glenn, any other
Kristen,
questions?
if you can just, maybe for my benefit only, I don't know, just refresh my memory on what how the assent process unfolds. Like that is, it's kind of like you need 50% of negative responses in order to not move it forward. Is that?
There's two in all of a sudden I'm questioning myself. I said there was two, but well, certainly with Cove Bay, we did a referendum, we did a vote. That's how we authorized the borrowing in Cove Bay when we needed to do assent of the electors for a local service area. So I'm quite sure that's an option. And then the second option is it's called a negative assent process. So we go through a process where we advertise that we intend to borrow this money on behalf of Eagle Cliff residents, and we look to ensure that we don't get negative responses from 50% plus one of the registered property voters in the area. And also there's a threshold. And I'm sorry, that number escapes me off the top of my head, but it's like an actual number of property owners and then a value. So the property owners representing 50% of the assessed value within the region have to respond with a negative, they don't support this borrowing in order for it to fail. Otherwise, it's assumed to be successful.
And we did that with Tunstall Bay for their water tank.
We did it with Tunstall and we did it with Blue Water as well.
Okay. My last question is just in regards to the 8% increase for starting in 2024. Is that just a standard number that we use for, advancing a project forward a year? How do you come to the 8% expected increase from starting the project this year versus next year?
I had some discussions with our consulting engineers who are helping us with this and other projects at Urban Systems, and based on their experience and our own experience about what we're seeing for costs of construction and how those are changing, 8% seemed like a reasonable projection. Yeah.
Okay. That's it for me, I think. Thank you.
I do have one more sort of corollary question for maybe Patrick. The firefighting capabilities that the interconnection will provide to any of the in-between properties, is there likely to be any improvement to that, Patrick?
Well, for sure. It would go from having no fire protection to having fire protection. So it's, I guess even if you're a property in between that doesn't elect to participate in the project and contribute and join the system, is still getting benefit from the project.
So that's going to be my follow-up question then. If indeed that's the case, properties in between that don't elect to join are potentially seeing a benefit, perhaps a reduction in insurance costs, etc. Is it possible to, even in a situation where a household does not necessarily elect to connect directly to the water system, but has an indirect benefit, call it a firefighting improvement, is it possible to levy a surtax on those properties, again, to share the load, because they will be benefiting from the infrastructure, in order to level that playing field a little bit?
The only way we could was if we included them in the local service area. And the only way that we can do that is by going through a petition process. Do you want to become part of this local service area? And if for someone who doesn't want to join, for them to become part of the local service area and all of a sudden pay Cove Bay parcel taxes to pay for the water treatment plant, which they have no interest in using anyways, I think that would be a really hard sell. So
Yeah,
I don't have a high degree of confidence that including properties in between in the local service area that don't indicate any interest in joining. I don't have a high degree of confidence that would that would pass.
I understand, and certainly, you know, if the ruling was that they were going to therefore pay part of the water treatment system, et cetera, I can, you know, I can see that. But if there is a potential direct benefit that they're realizing, like I say, call it a firefighting infrastructure surtax or something along that line, is there a way of, you know, piecing that out and steering the money accordingly? Perhaps there isn't, but
not that I can think of, and other than ensuring that they are drawn within the boundaries of the local service area. I don't see another way around it.
Okay, all right. Allison, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah. So just picking up on Glenn's question about is 820,000 enough? I mean, those estimates, we put the grant application in sometime in like early-ish 2022. I mean, it was there for about a year and a half, right? So all those numbers are based on 2022, and the tenders are going to come in 2024. So are we running a risk of not having enough borrowing? And then following up on that, I'm not quite sure I understand Kristen's comment about if let's say the tenders come in at 920,000 for total cost rather than, you know, 820 still needed. So we've got an extra $100,000. You've got 356,000 in reserves, but it sounds like you're not using those for the project. Would you use those for the overrun?
No, I would extend the parcel tax for a longer period to collect it.
So how do you extend the parcel tax? I mean, you've got to have all that money to finish the project. So that extra 100,000 is going to have to be paid out sometime in 2024, 2025. And if you don't use the reserves, where's that extra 100,000 going to come from if it's not borrowing?
Cash flow it internally for 4 or 5 months, I guess. I mean, once January 1st of the new year comes, technically we have the parcel tax revenue. You know what?
You could up the parcel tax for just 1 year to collect all that extra 100,000 in 1 year.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, need to think about that one a bit more.
Yeah.
Then the other question is the 110 that you used for dividing to come up with the new user rates. Is that just Eagle Cliff's property, or were you guessing some of the parcels properties in between would?
Sorry, can you
on one of your charts you said you used 110 as the new connections in coming up with the annual rate
with the parcel tax for Cove Bay?
Yeah.
So
annual water treatment plant parcel tax for Cove
so
Bay.
currently a resident pays more than that, like about.
No, but you said you estimated an additional 110 properties. Is that just the Eagle Cliff properties, or were you?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I couldn't.
So that would increase. That would further decrease by any addition of properties in between.
Okay, and then how many properties are there in between? Patrick said about 30 people responded, but how many are there actually?
Do you know, Patrick?
I think there's about 55
Okay.
or
that,
maybe more.
okay. Okay.
So about half
Um,
again.
Yeah. And then the firefighting one, I guess, is there some way to put something in the bylaws where, if water, well, first question, I guess, is Patrick, would you actually install fire hydrants along the interconnection line?
Well, that would be, yeah, and that would be the plan. That would be best practice.
Okay, but they're not benefiting Eagle Cliff, so why should Eagle Cliff be paying for those fire hydrants?
Well, I guess it depends on, which properties are doing. I mean, if you have a couple of properties joining the system and then a few properties that aren't joining the system, you
Yeah.
still have to provide a hydrant for, those properties.
Those ones, yeah. So then I guess the other question is, if people benefit from a hydrant, I know we tried to do this somewhere else before. Can you charge that house if it did have a fire and did benefit from having a hydrant there to put fire out for the amount of water that was used? Is there something that can go in the bylaws that do that? So that would maybe have some equity in there. Just thinking out loud with that one. But okay.
I don't know how that would work.
Yeah.
Tim, there are some questions in the chat from members of the public. If you
Okay. Just
Riley there.
stand by. I just want to canvass the committee one more time in case there's any corollaries or follow-ups. Seeing none. Okay, let's go to the public then. So in the chats,
I
what do
can
we
read it
got?
if you agree.
I've got it here. So Terry's asking, I think there are water use charges on top of this. How does Cove Bay charge compared to the $500 that Eagle Cliff residents currently pay per year? I think, Terry, you're referring to the capital parcel tax. And I think we clarified that Cove Bay currently does not have a capital parcel tax. I think, and Kirsten, you can correct me here.
No, that's not what Terry means.
Say
So
again.
the
Sorry.
user rates some people in Eagle Cliff pay 500, but some people pay 3,000. Eagle Cliff has a metered rate. So it really is based on consumption.
Yeah.
Cove Bay also is based on consumption. It's billed 3 times a year. I think their flat rate for the first 92 cubic meters is 280. And there's also a very nominal 10 cent per cubic meter charge from 0 to 90. And then it starts being metered from there at $1.67 per cubic meter after 90 cubic meters for the 3-month or 4-month period that is being measured.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen, for that clarification. Murray's commented, can we see that page of the estimated cost for ECA members and what effects will us joining have on the present payments for those in the Snug Cove area? Kristen, can you comment on that again?
You want to see the...
I think the slide that shows what the one before that, I think.
It's okay because Steph gave me the link.
Okay.
Yeah, so that part of the question is no good. Basically, what I want to know is the fees that Snug Cove pay now, are they going to go down because of our involvement?
It's not Snug Cove, it's Cove Bay Water. Snug Cove sewers are completely different and not included in any of this conversation.
Oh really?
So
okay.
It's Cove Bay Water, and their parcel taxes currently for residential properties are about 145 and 122. So I'm just going, don't quote me on that, but they're pretty close. Then with the addition of the extra 110 properties and potentially any in between. They drop from that to, sorry, I forget what I put in that slide there. 107 and 120. So yeah. So a little bit of a decrease each year.
Okay.
Not a huge amount.
Okay, does that answer your question, Murray?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question I see here, and it's a good one. Does the project funding include the cost of decommissioning the dam? So there is nothing in the project that I'm aware of yet on bringing the current reservoir, Eagle Cliff Reservoir, back to pre-lifted status. Is there, Patrick?
Yeah, that's a good point. Those costs haven't been included, and there would be some cost.
I put 50,000 as a project cost estimate for that, and I deducted that from when I did the calculation of the equity contribution as to what Eagle Cliff would have in its reserves. So I put something in there. I've thought about it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. So that's
just to be clear, you're going to fund the decommissioning of the dam from the reserves.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
That's where I'm leaning to at this point. Yes.
Okay. Then
Patrick, do you know, sorry to interrupt, but do you know if decommissioning of a dam like that is simply a backhoe removing the culverts and opening up, or is there a process required by the province to do this? It could be more expensive than what we would assume.
Yeah, it could be more than 50,000. I am hoping to get away with something fairly simple, essentially, carving out the dam down to the new high water level that we want, and fairly limited in terms of other restoration costs. I don't know that for sure. We'd be able to get away with, the most simple approach. We do need to investigate that further.
wasn't it Thurber that had the aerial photos that showed what the reservoir level looked like, or what the reservoir looked like back in, it was like the 1920s or something? I recall seeing an aerial photo that they showed us. I think it might have been when Glenn was acting in your position. It might be worth a call or a discussion with them to see if they could put their hands on that again.
Yeah.
Probably looks a lot like what it looks like right now.
Yeah, exactly. You pretty much nailed it. Okay, so another question that's been posted was to Patrick. What will the excess capacity be of the listed as Cove Crest, but I'm guessing it'll be the Cove Cliff system once everyone joins? So this is my interpretation of the question was that just a confirmation that it's been established that the water reservoir at Cove Bay is sufficient to meet all the needs that we're potentially connecting to it. Yeah,
we have looked at the sustainable yield of Grafton Lake under a number of current and future development scenarios that included adding Eagle Cliff and all the properties in between, and we're satisfied that there's plenty of water for everybody. Similarly, the capacity of once we get the water treatment plant operating the way it's designed and intended to, there is plenty of capacity there as well.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from public or the committee? Seeing none. Okay, so what is it that you need from us, Kristen and Patrick, in order to proceed with the authority for borrowing, the assent approval, et cetera, et cetera? What exactly do you need from us?
Just your support to go forth and start the assent process. So we would like to take a report to council that basically reiterates what we went through here today. We would like to get that borrowing process initiated in advance of budget adoption, so that once our 5-year financial plan is approved by council, that the authority to borrow will already have been, we've already achieved that. And then we will go forth with starting a communication process and a public engagement process to inform everybody and get them to be aware and understand what it is that we want to do and how much it's going to cost them. And then they'll have the opportunity to indicate their assent or their disapproval for that borrowing.
Okay. Do we have sample wording on a motion?
We probably should have drafted one.
I thought
Kristen, are you wanting input on doing a referendum versus the elector assent, the other option?
Certainly you could provide your opinion on that. And as staff, I would be recommending the assent process because it's so much less expensive. A referendum does run about $10,000 to book the school and pay the staff and order all of the ballots and that kind of stuff. So I just think an assent process is probably just a much more economical and efficient way to go. But if you have some strong opinions about that, certainly we're here to listen to them.
Any thoughts on that, Glenn or Len?
I would be more inclined to move this forward as quickly as we can, in my personal opinion, and I think that would be the assent process, cheaper and easier, probably.
Yeah, I agree.
Same. I agree with Glenn, and let's move on. I mean, let's give you the permission because it's what you've done a lot of work, and it sure seems fair to me.
Can I just ask a question about the timeline then, Patrick? Are we looking at a year's construction? Is that what I heard? So starting in 2004, ending in 2020,
Yeah.
2025?
It probably won't take a full year, no. It's previous borrowing, like establishing a borrowing bylaw, we've seen it take 6 months between the point of getting approval that we're going to go forward and borrow these funds, or getting the agreement to seek approval and then going through the assent process and then getting the borrowing bylaw. So that's why I said if we start that process now, we're still into next March or April before we have the borrowing bylaw, the funds in place. So
2 more summers on the current reservoir.
One more year. I think the schedule, as you showed it, Patrick, was 1 more year and completion scheduled March, April 2025, which is before the summer. Following.
I think I had feasibly, I mean, things go well, we could start construction, be in a position to start construction in, say, June of next year, and then have it complete by March in 2025. Yeah.
Just to ask a really pessimistic question, because it's part of my nature, what happens if the Cove Bay water treatment plant is still not operational at that time? Are we even allowed to connect under the current circumstances? I have all, I'm optimistic that it will, but I mean, it really has been one thing after another, and I'm just wondering, what happens if it's not ready when we're ready? Do we just keep going on the current system until we can?
I guess so. Which is really not much better than what you've got now in terms of water quality. It's essentially the same thing. No, I don't have a better answer than that. I mean, I don't expect to be in that situation, but
yeah,
in the worst case, it would be the only thing that we can do is supply chlorinated lake water to the system, which is what's happening, which is what it's always been. what's happening now.
So if I understand what you're saying, Patrick, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to understand, you're saying we would connect to Cove Bay anyway on the schedule as proposed. And the only difference is we're not getting the Cove Bay treated water. We're getting the Cove Bay chlorinated water, the same as our reservoir, basically. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
That would be one option. Yeah.
Okay. What would the other option be then?
Well, I guess the other option would be to keep using well, I guess there wouldn't be any point to keep using the Eagle Cliff Reservoir. No, I think that's what we would have to do.
Yeah.
So,
Because I think if I might add, I don't know that the water quality of Eagle Cliff is as big a concern for the residents as secure water supply. And if we're at least guaranteed a secure water supply, even if it's not the best water, I don't know. That's a good question, Glenn.
Well, I think the question from the community would be, why are we borrowing money until we know for sure that Cove Bay has a sufficient system to supply us? And I, again, it's just kind of like, I hope this conversation is just a waste of all of our time right now, and then we'll be able to get that plant operational in the next couple of months. But, that would be a question from the community, is like, shouldn't we just wait until see what happens with the treatment plant before we invest in our own connection to it? Yeah. So I guess it would have to be the municipality providing an assurance that, yeah, we're going to get this done, that come hell or high water, we'll get her done. But there's just a lot of people who are,
Yeah, I mean, I think that is where we're at, Glenn, because otherwise we have this $10 million white elephant on that. Like, it not having it work is not an option. I mean, if it doesn't work, like, what is the next step when you've built and paid for an asset and it doesn't function as the manufacturer said it's going to function? Your guess is as good as mine where it goes from there, but something has to happen in order to bring that plant online. We believe with a good deal of certainty that once they replace, like, everything else is fine. There were some other issues related to Waterhammer. Patrick can speak more to that, but those have all been resolved to our satisfaction. It's now just this filtration piece of equipment that the manufacturer themselves have acknowledged that it is faulty, and they're replacing it at their cost on their dime. So,
well, let's just hope we had that answer before we move forward with funding. Anyway.
Yeah,
that's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
any other comments, questions? I see that Steph has added a comment in the chat file with some proposed wording. Perhaps it says that the Eagle Cliff LAC recommend that council direct staff to initiate approval process for boring to fund the Eagle Cliff / Cove Bay connection project.
Thank you.
You need a scent approval in there,
Yeah.
a scent borrowing approval process.
Is that decided?
Well,
say again,
I
Seth?
got the feeling that the committee was supporting the assent borrowing process.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
So if you change an approval to an assent borrowing process or an assent process, yeah.
Is it alternative assent process, Counselor? Is that?
It is, yep.
Alternative
approval process is what you want to say.
So it's the alternative approval process.
Alternative assent approval process.
Kirsten, what's the wording?
If you put alternative approval process, they will be very clear that it's choice 2, not referendum.
Okay. Okay,
And
so
we're very clear on what the recommendation is, so we will definitely communicate that.
okay, so what we have now is that Eagle Cliff Water System Local Advisory Committee recommends that the council direct staff to initiate an assent approval process
The next one, alternative ascent.
Oh, there's one more, sorry. That Eagle Cliff Water System Local Advisory Committee recommends that council directs staff to initiate an alternative asset approval process for borrowing to fund the Eagle Cliff / Cove Bay water system connection project.
Does there have to be an amount in there?
You can add that, but the amount is going to be what we bring forth in our report, which is going to be what we.
So as presented at this meeting.
Yeah.
And presented at its October 11th.
Yeah.
LAC meeting. Yep. Okay. Any more wordsmithing or word crafting needed? Okay. Do we have a motion to accept or approve and a seconder and all in favor? Hands up. So we've got it in play. Okay, Steph, you're happy with that? Allison, meets your guys' needs?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, questions, anything else we need to raise? Other than that, we're talking next meeting, which is to be determined, and an adjournment otherwise.
I'll just make one comment, just because I go up to the reservoir regularly, and I just wanted to say thank you. I noticed we have a new high-tech measuring stick in place mounted on out there, which is great to see. I will just ask one favor, Patrick, if you can direct the guys who are up there. I think they forgot to remove the old rusty pipe, and it is below the high water line of the reservoir. So it would be good to have that taken out before it fills up.
It's okay, Glenn and Patrick, I did that today.
Thanks,
Tim.
All right.
Okay, any others? All right, guys, thanks. And again, Patrick, Kirsten, on behalf of ECLAC and the community, good job, good work. Thanks. It's been trying over the last few years.
Yeah.
And we've had our what shall we say, differences or discussions with each of our better interests in mind. But I think we're getting there, and so good work. Thank you.
Thank you again, too.
And she'll win for us. Good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you, LAC members and public.